some pretty heavy rain across southern areas, and that rain is now going to feed a little bit further northeastwards, affecting particularly East Anglia into Lincolnshire through this evening and overnight. Could cause some travel disruption, and some further flooding is possible too, but that rain gradually trying to clear away through the early hours. A few showers elsewhere, but also some drier, clearer weather, particularly for inland areas, could allow for a touch of frost and also some patches of fog first thing tomorrow morning. Otherwise, as we go through tomorrow, a bit of a wet start for some eastern parts. A lot of that rain will clear away, but for Orkney, Shetland, some persistent rain continuing into the afternoon, perhaps a little bit of sleet here as well. Otherwise, some showers most likely for parts of Wales, Western England, maybe coastal showers for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but something a little bit drier and sunnier further inland. Temperatures for many staying in single figures. As we look towards Saturday, and it's going to be quite a cloudy story for eastern parts. A few showery outbreaks of rain likely here. Sunnier though further west, with just a few coastal showers possible. Some blustery winds quite likely for Scotland. Elsewhere, lighter winds as high pressure builds in, and that high pressure is likely to dominate through Sunday into Monday, bringing largely dry but chilly weather for many. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Hello, good evening. I'm Richard Tice and I'm filling in for the splendid Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg. This is my last night of the week. He'll be back next week on State of the Nation. Huge show tonight. Boris Johnson, former Prime Minister, absolutely slams the Met Police for investigating Israel over alleged war crimes in Gaza. The Prime Minister and Sir Keir Starmer have started their battle for the ballots, the general election campaign today. We've had them both out. The Prime Minister, he says that his working assumption is the election will be in the second half of 2024. I wonder if we trust him on that. And new data, unbelievable data, reveals that the bosses of the biggest 100 companies, the FTSE 100, they earn more an hour than the average worker earns in a year. Just get that. In an hour, more in an hour than everybody else earns in a year. And the petition to strip the former Home Office boss of her CBE soars after the ITV drama aired. Now, before we go to the news, last night I said that I had an exclusive interview this evening with someone who was potentially being threatened with prison from the Child Maintenance Service. Now, it's an incredibly important issue that I'm committed to continue with. But we've got to get all the legal technicalities properly in place so that we absolutely expose the incompetence in a fair and proper way. Therefore, I'm going to come back to this in a few weeks' time. And I'll be joined in my panel by the brilliant panel of the GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and the editor of the Conservative Home magazine and online website, Paul Goodman. Don't forget, I want your views. Email me, mailmog@gbnews.com. But first up, it's time for the news of the day with Polly Middlehurst.
Richard, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the top story from the GB Newsroom tonight is that the Prime Minister has indeed confirmed he's working towards a general election in the second half of this year. Both Labour and the Liberal Democrats have been pushing for a spring election, the Prime Minister declining to rule that out, saying instead he wants to focus on the economy, cutting taxes and tackling illegal migration. Meanwhile, the Labour leader says he's ready to go to the polls and has criticised the Prime Minister for delaying the vote. Sir Keir Starmer vowed to stand up for working people and said the character of politics will change if Labour wins power. More bad weather's on the way, with Nottinghamshire County Council today declaring a major incident along the River Trent because of flooding and rising river levels. And that's as more heavy rain is hitting the UK already tonight. A yellow alert is in place in regions from Cornwall right across southern England to Norfolk. Train operators are warning services could be cancelled, and it's best to check before you travel. Detectives investigating the murder of a teenager in London stabbed on New Year's Eve are appealing now for the public's help. They've released 2 images of people they want to identify and speak to after they were pictured in North London on Sunday night. 16-year-old Harry Pittman died during what's being described as an altercation when crowds gathered on Primrose Hill to watch New Year's Eve fireworks. Prince Andrew has been reported to the police by the campaign group Republic after more allegations of sexual assault were revealed in unsealed Epstein court documents in the United States. Bill Clinton and the late Professor Stephen Hawking are among over 150 people mentioned in the documents, detailing their connections to the sex offender. Many of those named aren't accused of any wrongdoing, though. The unsealed files were all part of a civil lawsuit against Epstein's associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, who is herself serving a 20-year sentence for recruiting underage girls for Epstein. More documents are expected to be unsealed or unredacted in the coming days. And the Foreign Secretary says attacks by Houthi rebels in the Red Sea must stop immediately. Lord Cameron made the comments during a visit to the NATO peacekeeping mission in Kosovo. Drone attacks by Iran-backed Houthis from Yemen in international shipping lanes have drawn widespread condemnation, with the UK, the United States and other countries issuing a joint statement warning of consequences.
It's not just a British interest, this is a global interest. It really matters that ships are able to carry their cargoes without being attacked through the Red Sea, through the Suez Canal and elsewhere in the world. That's why we sent ships to help with Prosperity Guardian. That's why we will use those ships to stop missile attacks. But the clear message here, and over 10 countries have signed a statement saying to the Houthis, these attacks are unacceptable, they're illegal, and they've got to stop. And if they don't stop, action will be taken.
On TV, on digital radio and on your smart speaker. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Polly, thank you very much. Welcome, everybody, to Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation. I'm here for the next hour. We've got some fantastic stories and controversies to get through. Now, the Met Police, 36,000 officers looking after 8 million people in London. There's plenty going on. And tragically, drug crime is out. It's off the scale. Knife crime is off the scale. And they really have got plenty to be doing here in London. But it seems they've found time to help the International Criminal Court investigate possible war crimes that may have taken place by Israel in Gaza. Now, I mean, let's just think about this. We've just had marches week after week since October the 7th by the pro-Palestine supporters. Genocidal chants, horrific posters, calling basically and chants sort of from the river to the sea. And the Met Police allowed this to happen against my advice and better judgment, and I think I was right once again on that, because we saw, frankly, a vacuum of leadership. But the Met Police seem fit. They want to spend money on posters in airports, asking for evidence from travellers who may have been to the Middle East, may have been to Israel, or indeed to Gaza or elsewhere, if they've seen evidence of war crimes. And I'm thinking, hang on, this is not a good use of their time. It's not a good use of their money. I don't remember such evidence calls when Russia invaded Ukraine, with the war crimes in Syria and the crimes in the regional conflicts going on in Africa. Is it one rule for other conflicts and a different rule for Israel? Is it actually a version of anti-Semitism? Well, I'm delighted to be joined by Nigel Nelson in the studio to discuss this, and also down the line by barrister and political commentator Rupert Myers to discuss this. Rupert, thank you very much for being with us down the line. Nigel, welcome. I'm going to come to you, Rupert, first. Look, maybe this is a legal requirement of the Met Police. They've got to do it. But I have to say, I don't recall this happening in other conflicts. Have I missed it? Or actually is the Met Police wasting time, money and resources that should be better spent looking after Londoners?
Well, Richard, I'm still waiting to hear about a bicycle that was stolen in 2021. So I don't think the Met Police are going to be solving any war crimes anytime soon. Look, putting up posters at airports is probably not taking up a lot of money or cost from the Met Police. At the same time, yes, we probably do have an obligation under the Rome Statute of being signatories to the ICC to do something. But it is alarming that, as you say, at this time, there's this disproportionate focus on the Met Police investigating this, encouraging people to come forward with this. We know there's a lot of disinformation out there. There's a hell of a lot to wade through. Even the BBC was reporting that hospitals were being flattened with bombs when that didn't turn out to be the case. So it does seem worrying when you've got, as your news story reported, an incident that very tragically happened not far from where I am now, of a young man being stabbed to death on Primrose Hill on New Year's Eve. It will baffle your viewers to ask themselves, well, why are the Met Police sending officer after officer going around having to interview people, having to put up posters to investigate something that, frankly, isn't their job? And I'd also be wondering, last point, that we're not in the Balfour Declaration anymore. This isn't Sykes-Picot. It's not up to Britain to police what goes on in that part of the world.
Let's just read out what the posters in the airport say. If you've been in Israel, the Palestinian territories, and have witnessed or been a victim of terrorism, war crimes or crimes against humanity, then you can report this to the UK police. Well, OK. I mean, why don't they just report it direct to the ICC and cut the Met Police from acting as a postbox?
Well, and also we don't know that the Met Police are just acting as a postbox. We know that they've had over 40 communications so far. The Met Police, as Boris Johnson, the Daily Mail journalist has described it, have been politicized in this conflict. They're having a hard time of trying to police these protests and the various different sides of this cultural dispute and social dispute we have. And it might be better if they stepped away and focused on the bread and butter work of policing London.
Rupert, hang on. Let's see if Nigel Nelson in the studio agrees with you. The former Prime Minister, I'm so sorry, Boris Johnson, Nigel, said that this is a worrying politicisation of the Met Police, especially after seeing Met officers tearing down posters of some of the Israeli hostages that were kidnapped and taken to Gaza. Is Boris Johnson right? No. Or actually are the Met Police obligated to do this?
They're obligated. That we've signed up, as you've mentioned the Rome Statute, which is what set up the International Criminal Court. We then put it into an Act of Parliament in 2001. And part of the duties that we have signed up to is when the ICC asks police to do something in a particular country, they're meant to do it. So the reason for this, we're just putting it into perspective, the reason for putting the posters up now is that because of the Gaza war, an awful lot of people are coming through Heathrow Airport from Israel and Palestine.
And what about previous wars? The Russia-Ukraine war, what's gone in Syria and Africa? Have they been doing the same then, or is this a different rule?
It's not so much a different rule that
a different interpretation of the rule.
Well, the ICC is certainly investigating Russian war crimes. If there were allegations of Ukrainian war crimes, they would do the same thing, and the same thing would be if there were Palestinian war crimes. They would actually investigate that.
So you think they're applying an even hand?
Yes, I do.
OK, Rupert. Nigel Nelson in the studio thinks the Met Police are being even-handed and very fair on this. Do you agree with him, or is this over-politicisation?
I'm not sure without further evidence that I can agree with that. We know that the international community as a whole has a disproportionate and some might say unfair focus on Israel. If you look at UNCHR resolutions, they disproportionately, I think there are more in relation to Israel than there are to any other country in the world combined. The focus on the alleged crimes by Israel, we don't even know, of course, if there have been any. It's very difficult to get anything that's remotely accurate or truthful out of the fog of war, particularly when the information coming from the other side is coming from an area that is controlled by a terrorist organization. I personally think that the Metropolitan Police would be far better suited spending their time looking at the networks that are funding, through charitable donations and cryptocurrency, funding the tunnels that the IDF have discovered under Gaza, funding the rockets.
There's a whole raft of things, Rupert. Absolutely. I get your point, Rupert. I'm very grateful for your input. Thank you very much indeed, Rupert Myers, barrister and political commentator. Now, of course, we asked the Met Police for a comment, and they replied, under the terms of the 1998 Rome Statute, our war crimes team, so they've got a team on this, is obliged to support any investigations opened by the ICC that could involve British subjects. And in order to meet their obligations to support this ICC investigation that is linked to Israel and Palestine. And due to the fact that we are aware that relatively large numbers of people, including British nationals, are returning on flights to the UK from the region, posters signposting what could be done to contact the war crimes team have been displayed. Well, that's all very well, but why don't they just contact direct the ICC and cut the Met Police out of it? Now, Nigel, whilst I've still got you, I mean, some extraordinary posters have been appearing in the East End that I think we've got to be able to show on screen that are essentially misrepresenting the Labour Party, misrepresenting their logo, misrepresenting Transport for London, with some very aggressive, very unpleasant, frankly, scandalous observations there. This one is a picture of Keir Starmer looking like a Labour poster, and it says that Israel has the right to cut off water, food and electricity to 2 million people in Gaza, as though that's a quote from Keir Starmer. I mean, and they're actually using a Tower Hamlets logo. It's a complete fake poster.
Yeah, it is fake, and I think we're going to see an awful lot more of things like that this coming year. Now, that's a poster. We're going to have AI, which is going to be a problem. We're going to have deep fakes on social media. We're going to hear Keir Starmer's voice, and it won't be his. That kind of thing will carry on. This looks like the first shot of the Dirty Tricks campaign.
And the real danger of it is very quickly, and I think we've got a picture of the bus stop poster as well. Very quickly, this can actually trigger real division. There's the bus stop poster there. That is a fake poster on a bus stop. It's not a Clear Channel poster. It's horrific. But this is going to potentially incite hatred and potentially danger, for example, for the Labour MPs in that area and a wider area.
Yes, it will. I mean, this is why they're so serious. Yeah. And these kind of things need to be removed as soon as they can be, and if possible, find out who put them there.
Absolutely right. And we've got a quote from the Transport for from London spokesman who said, we're aware there's been some instances where there have been posters put up on bus stops in Tower Hamlets. These adverts are not authorised by TfL and our contractors are removing any found on their assets. I think this is really serious. I think we're also now rapidly seeing independent Muslim candidates appear in council elections, potentially parliamentary elections. I was contacted today by a very, very senior former special branch officer saying, you need to be careful about your security, you need to be thinking about it. So this is serious stuff.
It is. I mean, an awful lot of MPs get death threats constantly. They don't talk about them to an awful lot, but they certainly get them. And these things just encourage it.
I'm afraid they do. Nigel Nelson, thank you so much indeed, and thank you to Rupert Myers earlier. Well, coming up next, folks, we are going to be talking about the battle of the ballots. Yes, Sunak and Starmer gave their pitches to the electorate today. Don't go anywhere, that's going to be fascinating.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, my friends, to State of the Nation with me, Richard Tice. Now, we've been discussing the Met's involvement in assisting the International Criminal Court in their war crimes investigation. And you've been sending in your thoughts, and it's fair to say, I think you agree with me. I might be right again. Maureen says you couldn't make it up. There are crimes like robbery, rape, burglary, and worse is the truth. People are even having their coats stolen off them. But our police have to spend time looking into war crimes in Israel and Gaza. What else are we going to stick our oar into, says Maureen. Suzanne says, I think Boris is right. Scotland Yard should look at issues we have at home before wading into international business. I guess it's a question of balance, and as Nigel quite rightly said, there are legal obligations, but it just feels to me that it's a sort of dilution of our resources. Now, of course, the battle for the election has started. It's kicked off. There were speeches yesterday, and then there have been speeches today. The Prime Minister, he wants to do something a little bit differently today. First of all, he couldn't even be bothered to put a suit and tie on. Let's just take a little clip of him talking to some people in Mansfield.
My working assumption is we'll have a general election in the second half of this year, and in the meantime I've got lots that I want to get on with. This Saturday we'll be introducing a significant tax cut for millions of people in work, worth on average £450 for an average worker. Because we've halved inflation, we want to keep managing the economy well and cutting people's taxes, and I want to keep tackling illegal migration. And we cut the number of arrivals last year by over a third, but we've got more to do, and we want to get the Rwanda scheme through Parliament and up and running. So look, I've got plenty to get on with, and that's what I'm focused on doing, delivering for the British people.
Seriously? Seriously, Prime Minister? You literally said we want to keep managing the economy well and cutting people's taxes. The national debt's going up, the economy is at best flatlining, the last quarter and the last month of data, the economy is actually reducing, and your standards and your thresholds are so low that you're saying that's managing the economy well? We've got the highest taxes since the Second World War, and you're saying you're cutting taxes? I wonder if that's really being completely honest with the truth. Well, don't worry. We have more excitement because, yes, Sir Keir Starmer, he was out with his speech today, and he had a lot to say, taking a fair amount, in fact, well over half an hour. Let's just see what Sir Keir Starmer had to say.
The choice now at the next election is so clear, which is between 14 years of decline and a decade of national renewal. So I promise this, a new mindset, mission government, an understanding at the core of everything we do, that it is our job to tackle tomorrow's challenges today, the hope of the certain destination. That's why the national missions we've set out, the measurable goals, whether it's the highest growth in the G7, halving violence against women and girls, clean power by 2030, now they are unapologetically ambitious.
Sorry. I'm so sorry. Goodness, thank you, Nigel. Just nearly nodded off there. Well, gentlemen, thank you for staying awake in those two segments. Let's come to you, Nigel, first about the Prime Minister. So he's given us a working assumption the election's going to be in the second half of the year. First of all, do you believe him, or is he tricking us all?
I wonder. I mean, a working assumption gives him lots of wiggle room.
Yes.
It's in his gift. He knows exactly when he wants to hold it. He doesn't have to have working assumptions. That's what other people have. He can actually have his own assumptions.
So you think he's having his cake and eating it? Mr. Goodman, is he telling the truth? Is he being completely honest with the British people? Can we trust him on this one?
Well, he's at least taking some of my advice, because I suggested earlier this week that he's not going to want to go to the polls in May if he's 18 points behind. And the way our system works is the Prime Minister, basically, if the monarch agrees, chooses the date of the election. You know, you'll remember the Fixed Terms Parliaments Acts. That didn't really work, where they tried to find specific dates. So that's the system we have. And he's 18 points behind now. Is he really going to have closed the gap by May? No. So what he's trying to do is to stop Labour getting up ahead of steam and saying, as he dithers, he's a bottler. He's not gonna. He can't make up his mind. He's trying to kill this story now.
You trust him, but come on, he's not being honest.
This isn't a matter of trust. I'm trying to explain what he's doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
But he's not been really completely honest with us, saying that the economy is going well and that he's cutting taxes overall, isn't he? He's been pretty selective there. at best. Fibbing at worst.
I'm staggered that, as the leader of a political party, you should ever suggest that politicians are always entirely straightforward.
I'm just trying to present an unbiased approach to it. I mean,
no, of course you're right. I mean, politicians pick and choose their facts, and he's not telling the whole story.
Yeah,
he's putting the best gloss on what he can, as all politicians, Richard, tend to do.
Properly picking and properly choosing, Nigel Nelson, isn't it? Now let's go on to the dynamic Keir Starmer, leader of the opposition, hopefully the next Prime Minister for those Labour voters. What do you think to his speech today? I mean, lots of cliches, lots of lovely Blairite expressions. You probably wrote some of this stuff 20 years ago. He was talking about tilting the country this way and moving it that. Lots of responsibility. All good stuff?
Yeah, but it's not a lot of detail, and there's a reason for that. We're in election year. He's now putting together his manifesto. Every time he's come up with a decent policy and put it out there, the Tories have gone and nicked it. They nicked the one on immigration by stopping employers from getting cheap foreign labour in at 20% discount. That was a Labour policy that they nicked. They nicked the windfall tax. They nicked from his idea whereby you would use the private sector to carry out NHS operations, to cut waiting lists. That was stolen. So he's not going to come up with loads of policy, and he's got a manifesto just around the corner.
But surely, whichever party you may or may not support, voters actually want to know, what are you going to do? Warm words and waffle is all very nice and very aspirational, and that's lovely. But where's the... At some point, voters are going to want to know the action. Do you think we're going to have to wait right until the last 5 weeks?
Well, there's certainly the actual detail will be in the manifesto, but no, he has come up with a load of stuff. We do know about...
There was nothing in today's speech at all,
well, there was
by way of detail. You've admitted that.
There were some repetitions of things we do know about. The tax on the non-DOMs to go and fund 2 million operations, that was in there.
What happens if all the non-DOMs leave? Then there's no tax, then there's no ability to look after the operations.
Right. If all 26,000 leave, you're right, that the whole policy falls down. According to the independent research, fewer than 100 of those are going to leave.
Oh, give me a break. What?
That is that's Warwick University and the London School of Economics, who have gone through the records as they stand from HMRC and come up with those figures. So if that's right, you're only losing 100. You're going to be raising 3.2 billion pounds.
I tell you what, folks, you're hearing it live on air. If during a Labour administration only 100 non-DOMs leave the country, I will eat an Australian bush hat.
I shall hold you to that.
You hold me to that, Nigel Nelson. Look, Sir Keir Starmer, he said he'd talk about bulldozing red tape to get building. Do you believe him?
He didn't really say very much today. And
he did say that.
They've been all over the place on planning. I mean, there's an entire sort of dossier on Labour politicians in the Commons standing up for the rights of local communities to defend their neighbourhoods. And Starmer's made this speech relatively recently, so I think they're in a bit of a muddle here. On the whole, the speech didn't really say very much. Nigel is right. This is what oppositions tend to do.
But here's the point. But it's worse than that. Actually, the opposition voted against the government's intention to try and free up planning consents for about 100,000 new homes.
Yeah,
the opposition, they voted against it. That was an opportunity to get building, and they said no.
I mean, that's part of the point I'm making. They've been all over the place on housing and planning in the last few years. But Starmer, I think, has seen a gap. And in government, what he'll try to do, if he wins, which at the moment it looks as though he probably will, he will want to build lots of houses in Tory areas.
Finally, Nigel, how is Starmer going to create some growth? Just in 15 seconds.
15 seconds, it'll be that 28 billion he needs to borrow to have a green revolution based on a new company, GB Energy. And if he can create growth through that, we'll talk about 1 million new jobs.
Really?
Yes.
Green jobs?
Yeah, green jobs.
80% of the offshore wind farms are overseas owned, and they're overseas jobs. I'm not believing it, but we'll come back to it. Nigel Nelson and Paul Goodman, my brilliant panel, will be coming to you later. Thank you very much indeed. Well, according to new analysis, talking big businesses and jobs, chief execs of the biggest 100 companies earn more in an hour than the average worker earns in a year. And according to new data, nuclear power output is at the lowest since the 1980s, ahead of a winter cold snap. Brilliant. I think this could put Rishi's net zero plan right on the back burner. Don't go anywhere, folks.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Radio.
Welcome back to State of the Nation, my friends. Well, we've been discussing a range of things, and you've been sending in your thoughts. Paul on Sir Keir Starmer's speech says if he was in the pulpit, he would have an empty church. Goodness me, Paul, that's a bit harsh. Colin says Starmer is a wolf in sheep's clothing. After winning the election, he'll be strongly influenced by the left. And Corbyn, really? Who he supported before, and swing his policies to the left, which is what he really wants to realise. Interesting, very interesting indeed. What's also interesting is the quantity of money that the bosses of the biggest 100 companies listed on the stock market that's called the FTSE 100 are now earning. The average, just get this, the average is £3.81 million a year. That's about, these numbers are mind-boggling. Per hour, that's £1,171.56. Don't forget the pence. If you can get that, nice work if you can have it. That's 109 times the average salary for a full-time worker of a whisker under £35,000. Some of the bosses have got way more than that. The AstraZeneca boss, 15 million quid. The BAE Systems boss, defence industry, over 10 million quid. Gentlemen in the studio, look, I believe in free markets. I believe in rewarding people well for good performance. But these numbers are astonishing. 109 times the average workers' pay, whereas back 24 years ago, it was just 39 times the salary.
Yeah.
What's happened here, Nigel?
Well, good question. They've been just getting more and more money because they can. So 50 years ago, it was 20 times. 20 years ago, it was 50 times, and it's been going up...
20 years ago, it was 39 times.
Oh, so, OK. And it's been going up steadily since then, so now we're at 109 times. Now, I can't believe a CEO is worth 5 times in real terms what they were 50 years ago. It doesn't seem to make sense to me.
Well, I suppose the argument to that is, well, we live in a more global world, and boards of directors to attract and retain the best talent, they've got to pay global salaries. Is that the defence, Paul Goodman?
Well,
there's no other defence for this extraordinary growth, is there?
The question really is, you might think these differentials are too big, or you might indeed think they're not. But the question is, if you think they're too big, and you can see immediately there's a bit of an issue here, what are you actually proposing to do about it? And I think that's the question that applies in this case. Are you simply going to tax these people more? What effect does that have on AstraZeneca or in BAE, who you named, who make profits and create jobs?
There is another way. I mean, the whole thing is, I'm not actually against the big money. It's not the money I object to. It's the fact that these people are taking these huge pay rises and not giving the same amount to the workforce.
Well, so I think the globalisation point, at the top of these businesses, you get that sort of line of argument. My issue is that I think that we've had mass immigration at the ordinary workers' levels that's depressed wages of ordinary workers, and so that, I think, is one of the reasons for the increase in the differential.
Well, I mean, I don't think that immigration is actually depressing wages. I think that what we've got is companies now depressing wages by getting rid of people who are higher paid and constantly employing people.
Yeah, but if you increase the supply
paid.
of a product, i.e. labour, then the price of that goes down. It's just basic economics.
There will be an
element, there's a depressing effect of mass immigration.
An element of that, especially on the basis that migrants were being paid 20% less than everybody else. Point I'm making here is, if you had a system whereby the percentage that the boardroom pay themselves, they pay the workforce the same percentage, boardroom can have as much money as they like, provided if it's 30% in the boardroom, it shouldn't be 3% of the workforce.
Interesting stuff. I mean, I guess it's about accountability, and I guess if you're paid the big bucks and you perform, everyone will say fine, the shareholders say fine.
It's also about the very first thing you raise, which is what's going on in global markets and the effects of the differentials on pay. I mean, that's a very big driver here. And it's true that if you look at some of the scale of these increases for the bosses compared to the workers, it looks very big, and some people argue it's obscene. But the bosses are bearing a certain amount of risk. If you mess up in a company like this, you're out.
I'm delighted you mentioned that, because actually in the last segment we're going to look at a boss who wasn't held accountable for significant failures with the post office scandal. So we'll come back to that in a moment. Gentlemen, fascinating discussion. If you've got any views on that, folks, you know the email address, get in touch. But first of all, I want to talk about nuclear power, nuclear energy, because there's a serious risk we might run out of electricity if we have a cold, windless snap. And I'm delighted to be joined down the line by the very experienced energy consultant, Catherine Porter. Good evening, Catherine. Thanks for being with us. So we hear today that nuclear power output has dropped to its lowest level since 1982. It's a major setback for the net zero plans because, of course, there's no CO2 with nuclear power. I mean, this is unbelievable. There's been a 15% decline in 1 year, and now nuclear power is only 13% of our electricity compared to about 30% in the 1990s. It's not gone very well, has it, Catherine?
It hasn't, and it's only going to get worse, unfortunately, because of the 5 remaining nuclear power stations. 4 are due to close by March 2028. And the expectation is really that Hinkley Point C won't open until the 2030s, which means we'll only have 1 power station, nuclear power station, which is Sizewell B, on the system, and that will need to go offline for maintenance and refuelling at various points, leaving no nuclear on the system.
We did have I think we had a Deputy Prime Minister back in about 2011 or 12 who said that nuclear power was no good because it would take too long, it wouldn't be ready until 2023. You've just confirmed it won't be ready until sort of 2030. I mean, this is serious mismanagement by the governments over 10 to 15 years, isn't it?
It is, and it was a very poor choice to go with the European pressurised water reactor technology, which is being built at Hinkley Point C. There are better options, and there were better options at the time that the government entered into that contract. And we've seen subsequently that in South Korea, KEPCO has managed to build 6 new modern reactor designs. They've actually got another 2 that are opening imminently. Some of those are in South Korea and some are in UAE. And they're building those in 8 years. On time and on budget, whereas the EPR is very many years delayed and it's gone way, way over budget.
Oh, that's a surprise.
So
Building infrastructure in the United Kingdom and it's gone over budget. I think we might have heard that before, Catherine. So is it really true that our nuclear capacity now is the lowest we've had since the mid-70s?
Yes, exactly, because the existing fleet has been ageing. And as I said, there are only 5 reactors left, and 4 of them are advanced gas-cooled reactors, which are all due to close by March 2028. And then that would just leave Sizewell B, which is a pressurised water reactor. That was built more recently. That opened in 1995, and it isn't scheduled to close until 2035, although EDF is planning to extend the life of that plant. Now, it is looking at also extending the lives of the AGRs. There's going to be an update, I think, next week saying whether they're going to achieve that. But they are battling a little bit with the Office for Nuclear Regulation, which has got what is, on any measure, an overly conservative approach to looking at these older reactors. And I think that needs to be really addressed if we're going to maintain energy security.
But maybe, Catherine, we shouldn't worry because the wind always blows, the sun always shines, and with offshore and onshore wind turbines and ever more solar farms, it'll all be fine, won't it? What are we worried about?
Oh, well, yeah, solar's all very well, except in our periods of maximum electricity demand, which is in the evening in the winter. Obviously, it's dark, so there is 0 solar contribution. And you go through high-pressure weather systems when wind output is really low. And I think there's been a view that we can get around that with importing. But the trouble is most of the countries that we're connected with, really with the exception of Norway, we all share very similar weather. And then with the exception of Norway and France, we all have pretty similar electricity mixes and are all following a wind-led transition strategy. So we can all have low wind at the same time. And then you won't be able to import it because nobody will want to.
So is that the moment of risk that actually we basically run out of electricity and then the National Grid has to pay individuals and businesses to turn stuff off? Rationing of electricity. How close are we to that?
Well, that's already happening because last year the National Grid introduced the demand flexibility service where customers could get paid to reduce their demand. But actually, it gets even worse when you have a real shortage because then you'll get particularly industrial demand being curtailed without being compensated potentially. And even if they're being compensated, it's still very economically damaging to do that if it's not being done on a voluntary basis because it effectively requires a reduction of economic output.
Doesn't seem a very smart policy to me. I'm a big fan of nuclear. Anyway, Catherine Porter, thank you so much indeed for that. Well, I guess we've just got to hope that the wind keeps blowing nicely and carefully at all times, and then everything should be fine. Coming up next, should the former boss of the Post Office be stripped of her CBE after the damning revelations of the Horizon scandal? And a victim of this dramatic injustice joins me down the line to tell all. Absolutely extraordinary. Don't go anywhere on that. Also, last night, I said that I had an exclusive interview this evening with someone who was a potentially being threatened with prison from the Child Maintenance Service. It's an incredibly important issue. I'm absolutely committed to getting this story out there. We've got to get the legals right, properly in place to do the story justice. I will bring this back to you in a few weeks' time. Stay with us on State of the Nation.
Patrick Christie's tonight, 9 till 11 p.m. Lord Bailey hits back against accusations of sexism by Carol Vorderman.
On one hand, she's got all that stuff, you know, she's a serious political commentator. And then if you look at her Instagram, it's all pictures of her bums and her boobs. So what is it? What is it here? She can't be both.
Trigger warnings for James Bond. An ex-Bond girl kicks off. Starmer wants votes for kids and should Ed Davey quit over the postmaster scandal. A window into a Lib-Lab coalition of chaos. And does King Charles need to talk about Andrew, who's just been reported to the police by Republic? All of that on Patrick Christie's tonight, 9 till 11 p.m.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise
and who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation, my friends. Well, we've been discussing all sorts of things, the fat cat CEOs and the like, and nuclear power, and whether we're going to run out of electricity. Jackie has mailed in saying 109 times the average salary is flat-out greed, she says. Pull out the books for a forensic financial police audit. I think the audit's not the problem, Jackie. I think the issue is actually the remuneration of the board of directors, and I do think that there's a depressing effect of mass immigration, which has allowed this gap to increase. Gary says, pretending to be asleep during Starmer's speech. Gary, you think I was pretending? Brilliant, I'm still laughing now, says Gary. Well, I tell you what we're not laughing about, and that is the final item of the show. Some of you may have started watching what I'm told is a really good documentary series called Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. This is about probably the greatest miscarriage of justice ever seen in UK history. That's how some people have described it, where for some 16 years, the Post Office relentlessly pursued branch owners, operators across the country for theft, fraud, false accounting, despite knowing that actually there were problems in their own system. Truly unbelievable. 700 prosecutions, people lost their homes, lost their life savings, went to prison, and tragically, some have already passed away and some committed suicide. Well, joining me now is the former postmaster, post office scandal victim himself, Christopher Head, who I think was the youngest postmaster back in 2006. Christopher, thank you for joining me on the show. Just give us a sense, Christopher, of your experience. What was your story, and where you think the situation's now, and what should happen now?
Yeah, I mean, hi Richard. I ran the branch from 2006 up until 2015, and over the years we had, what we call them minor discrepancies, but hundreds of pounds missing every month. And in 2014, I had a lot of problems with the Horizon system where it would freeze. We're getting messages on the screen saying the data was corrupt and all of these things, and there was a shortfall of £40,000, which a few weeks later doubled to over £80,000, and
wow.
that led to suspension and to termination. And Post Office originally went down the criminal prosecution route. About 6 months later, they said to me that they were dropping all charges, but they wouldn't give a reason why. And then they said that under the terms of the contract, we still want our money back, so we're going to start civil proceedings against you. So that's, that.
And what year was that? So they were pursuing civil proceedings. What year was that, Christopher?
That was 2015.
And 15. When the truth is, we know actually that they had. It turns out they knew internally that they had serious problems, and that they were still pursuing people. What's your feeling towards the people at the top of the post office at the time, including the then boss of the post office, Paula Venables, who was then awarded, there's a picture of her there, who was then awarded a CBE in 2019?
Well, I think, like we said, is that we need to know who exactly knew what and when, what was being communicated, because, she turned up to the select committee, as we saw in the Mr. Bates drama. And, she was basically saying that she was not aware of any problem. She was asking, are we aware of any remote access? I need to be able to say no. Well, you don't say I need to say no. You say, what is the truth? And we're sitting here now, and she's got them the CBE for services to the post office. But look at the state of what the network is now, the people of lives are being devastated.
And I think there's a petition that has gone pretty viral, actually, for her to be stripped of her CBE, which has got some 150,000 signatures on it. Quite extraordinary. Christopher, thank you so much indeed for your thoughts on that. Just finally, Christopher, Sir Ed Davey was the Post Office Minister. He declined a meeting with the campaigner, Mr. Bates, who's part of this still part of this documentary. What do you think Sir Ed Davey should do? I mean, he's partly culpable here, isn't he?
Well, I think, look, when you go to a minister and he's turned around saying that he was misled by post office officials, even if it's an arm's length body, you don't just take their word for it. You say, well, I want to find out for myself. And therefore you have to dig deep, and you say, well, I want to hear the other side of the story. Why didn't he meet Alan? Find out what was really going on.
Christopher, thank you so much indeed for your thoughts. Well, we approached the Lib Dems for a comment, and they said that Sir Ed Davey bitterly regrets that the Post Office were not honest with him at the time. His heart goes out to the families caught up in this miscarriage of justice, and he'll fully cooperate with any inquiry to get to the bottom of what went wrong. I think I may need, I may have a statement from the Cabinet Office as well on behalf of Paula Venables, which is here, which says it would be inappropriate to comment on any individual honours recipient. Well, I tell you what, 150,000 people are giving their comment. That is for sure. I just think this is, it's another shocking story. It's just outrageous. And once again, we've got the lack of accountability. She left the post office in 2019. They knew all about this scandal. She'd been paid almost 4 million quid over 6 or 7 years. She's awarded the CBE. Where's the accountability? As I said earlier, fine, if you want to be paid the big bucks, then you've got to actually suffer the responsibility and the accountability. Drives me absolutely bonkers. I need to calm down. I'm sure a man who is completely calm is the purveyor of the next show, Patrick Christie's. What's on the bill of fare tonight, Patrick? Good evening.
Loads on tonight. Now, Carol Vorderman has accused Lord Sean Bailey of sexism. He is on my show tonight, and he's going to respond to those allegations. Get your relatives out of hospital. NHS bosses are urging people due to the ongoing junior doctors' strike. That is a massive problem facing the nation, and the co-chair of the BMA's Junior Doctors Union appears to have gone full Tonto today. We are also going to be talking about Prince Andrew, who has been referred to the police by the anti-monarchist group, should the royal family now come and speak out. All of that and much, much more, as, of course, we will bring you tomorrow's newspaper headlines today before anyone else, so make sure that you tune in for all of that.
Absolutely fantastic, Patrick. It'll be a great show, as always, I am sure. I'm just going to come back to this. Look, I don't mind people being paid well. There's got to be some accountability. There's surely got to be some responsibility. And it feels to me that too often, whether it's in the public sector or indeed the private sector, you haven't got that. Anyway, it's been great hosting the show this week for Sir Jacob. I'm sure he's very rested. He will be back in the studio for State of the Nation on Monday evening. You will not want to miss that. So much to discuss at a crucial election year. Have a good evening. I've been Richard Tice. It's been great.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. While some of us may see a touch of frost and some fog patches tonight, there is still some heavy rain affecting southeastern parts. An area of low pressure has pushed its way up as we went through today, bringing some pretty heavy rain across southern areas, and that rain is now going to feed a little bit further northeastwards, affecting particularly East Anglia into Lincolnshire through this evening and overnight. Could cause some travel disruption and some further flooding is possible too, but that rain gradually trying to clear away through the early hours. A few showers elsewhere, but also some drier, clearer weather, particularly for inland areas, could allow for a touch of frost and also some patches of fog first thing tomorrow morning. Otherwise, as we go through tomorrow, a bit of a wet start for some eastern parts. A lot of that rain will clear away, but for Orkney, Shetland, some persistent rain continuing into the afternoon, perhaps a little bit of sleet here as well. Otherwise, some showers most likely for parts of Wales, Western England, maybe coastal showers for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but something a little bit drier and sunnier further inland. Temperatures for many staying in single figures. As we look towards Saturday, and it's going to be quite a cloudy story for eastern parts. A few showery outbreaks of rain likely here. Sunnier though further west with just a few coastal showers possible. Some blustery winds quite likely for Scotland. Elsewhere, lighter winds as high pressure builds in, and that high pressure is likely to dominate through Sunday into Monday, bringing largely dry but chilly weather for many. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Carson, this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we'll